Good afternoon, reading room. How are you? Boy, oh boy, I don't understand why people just can't use their voice like I do to communicate some pretty easy things. Why it has to be all about signals of shutting your mouth, and that's the reason why people are able to drug you? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I hear the toilet being flushed about 50 times a day. Sounds like somebody doesn't have a voice like I do. That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know. What is this? What is it? I clearly don't have the upper hand. You clearly know who does. What are you such a mouse about? The God Who Infinitely Transcends Infinity by Robert J. Russell. God Talk, Glimmers of Knowing Within the Horizons of Unknowing. Amidst the trapping, so this is a new chapter, and so the chapter is called The God Who Infinitely Transcends Infinity. Let's see what Robert J. Russell has to say. This again is still in the second part of this book, part 2, Approaches to Scientific and Theological Answers. God Talk, Glimmers of Knowing Within the Horizons of Unknowing. Amidst the trappings of daily life, we occasionally sense the presence of something that, although lying beyond the limits of our ordinary world, reaches up from the infinite depths that sustain our world to touch our lives and fill us with hope and compassion. In these moments, we know the staggering beyond in our midst, the astonishingly tender caress of that caring ultimacy in which we live and move and have our being. That's from Acts chapter 17, verse 28. I don't know. We come away from these experiences enriched by a glimmer of understanding of what, or better yet, who touched us, though our understanding lies within the all-encompassing mystery of its infinite unknown source. In seeking to articulate this numinous experience, we use the sacred and sublime word that millions of Jews, Christians, and Muslims have used for centuries: God. With this word, we affirm the personal existence and ultimate reality of that which transcends us utterly, a transforming power and singular presence that has touched the innermost reaches of ourself and that even we can barely grasp. Our experience has left us staggered with the realization, given as an irreducible datum, that this God, who is absolute mystery, is our creator and redeemer, the source and goal not only of our life, but also of the existence and destiny of the cosmos. It seems entirely fitting that our talk about God should start with how little we know about God. Theology, which strictly speaking is God talk, from the Greek word theos for God and logos for word, starts with what we do not understand before it seeks to say something about that which we understand, at least in part. In the long traditions of Western monotheism, the way of unknowing leads us, and the way of knowing follows behind. These ways have come to be called the via negativa, the negative way of denial, and the via positiva, the positive way of affirmation, respectively. These ways are important when we talk about grace, creation, or atonement, for example, but they are particularly important when we attempt God talk in the particular sense of discourse about the nature of God. This means, in turn, that when we talk about God, we should begin by attempting to say something about those divine attributes that we only know by negation, that is, by their utter contrast with our experience of ourselves and our universe. Such statements are called apophatic, apophatic, meaning to deny. The most inclusive of these attributes is the incomprehensibility of God. The word God stands for a self-surpassing mystery, an ineffable reality lying beyond all our thoughts and sensations, that which is wholly other. In a similar way, we speak apophatically when we refer to God's infinity and eternity as being in contrast with our finite and mortal world. Everything we experience in this visible world seems finite and limited, temporal and transitory. It comes into existence, endures for a while, then passes away. It is really here now, yet soon it is gone forever. By utter contrast, however, God alone is invisible, unlimited, and infinite, everlasting and eternal, unchanging and constant, the ground of being, the ultimate, unseen but ever-present reality. But the contrast, too, tells us something inestimably important about God's relation to the world. It is only by being incomprehensibly different from this world that God can be the source of this world and its final home. Thus, the way of unknowing is paradoxically a way of knowing and a source of confident hope. This is very, very confusing, but it is, God can be the source of this world and its final home. It is only by being incomprehensibly different from this world that God can be the source of this world. And that was what C.S. Lewis was talking about this morning when we were reading about the universe. The only way for God to be the source of this world, of the universe, is to be separate from it. The architect of a house, as C.S. Lewis said, the architect of a house is outside the house. He's not a wall. He's not part of the house. That's an interesting thing to try and wrap your brain around. Having said that, we also attempt to speak about God, about what God has revealed to us about God's nature and purposes through scripture, tradition, and personal experience. And now in the past 3 centuries, and increasingly today through the great discoveries of the natural sciences. Here we can talk about God, not by sheer contrast, but by making a positive analogy with key experiences in our own lives and with the world in which we live. Such statements are called cataphatic, since they involve an analogy between God and what we know about in the world. And I guess maybe if I were to interpret all these why questions that I see falling out of the sky, why do we talk about God? Why do I talk about God? Why don't you? You don't, probably because it doesn't interest you. You think it's a con. It interests me. I believe that I'm driven by human nature that's positive, that grows, through these things. You know, prayer's not listed in here. We don't have to grow through prayer. I think I grow to understanding, though, prayer. I think I grow to have certain things like more honest look at life or more patience through prayer. We don't, and clearly I do not get my gifts, my rewards, the things that I work for. Clearly, I have not gotten those things. So, why? Why? Why do these things? Why pray for patience? Because not praying doesn't give me it either. But there is, when I continue on in this way, there is a way to find a certain balance. You know, This world is filled with fear, and I am not the source of that fear. It's time you started looking at the source of that fear. And by the way, it is sinister. It is treacherous. It was given to me in the form of drugs, forced on me by this system. I fight my battles the way I fight my battles. You put your narratives on me, and I give you the big middle finger. It is incomprehensible to me that in a democracy, a woman can't speak like this. As I said yesterday, they hated Hillary Clinton. They hated Michelle Obama. They hated women's votes. That is what they wanted to do when they said, own the libs. That's what they wanted to do. Having said that, we also attempt to speak about God, about what God has revealed to us about God's nature and purposes through scripture, tradition, and personal experience, and now in the past 3 centuries, and increasingly today through the great discoveries of the natural sciences. Here we can talk about God not by sheer contrast, but by making a positive analogy with key experiences in our own lives and with the world in which we live. Such statements are called cataphatic. I already said this. Since they involve an analogy between God and what we know about in the world. When we experience wonder and awe in the immensity and beauty of the universe, we are led to think of God as utterly wondrous, terribly awesome, and a source of ecstatic beauty. When we experience love in our lives, we are forgiven. When we are forgiven our inequities by those we have wronged, when we know the goodness of home, hearth, health, and family, then we speak of God as perfect love, unconditional mercy, the source of all that is good, and our final home beyond death and grief. Most important, when we look up from the routine of life and witness the sacred in our midst, as Moses did when he turned aside from tending to his sheep to go to see the burning bush. Exodus 3:1-6. Then we confess God is utterly holy. Thus, we are surrounded with the mystery of God that surpasses all knowing. Yet we know that this God seeks us and would be known by us, and we move ahead in the light of this knowledge. To do so, we must remember the poverty of faith in light of the surpassing mystery of God, and cloak all that we wish to affirm in the spreading folds of our unknowing. We explore the cataphatic on the grounds of the apophatic. The way of faith is always the way of humility. Remarkably, many scientists take a similar approach to the mystery of the universe around us and in us. We find that the exploration of the universe requires that we affirm and celebrate what we discovered only within the shadow of the greater awareness of all that we do not know and perhaps never will. That's got an asterisk, and here's the asterisk. We can put this more formally by claiming that the scientific method, much like the theological method, proceeds by hypotheses held tentatively, intended as true, tested by data, and subject to acceptance or rejection by the consensus of the community. All genuine knowledge, religious or scientific, is finally a small light shining in a vast darkness, unknown, illuminating the unknown. And maybe that's something to think about. That it isn't just a scientific knowledge that gives us genuine knowledge, but that we also have to have a knowledge of who God is for us to be able to accomplish peace or respect or being guided by human nature as opposed to the state of nature. Laws, right? That's what they're saying. If you want to be illuminated, then you cannot possibly only look at this world through scientific eyes. And that's the problem with ignoring God. That's the problem. You can't look at this world through only scientific eyes. Number one, it is masked in bias, complete and utter bias. Near the end of his life, Sir Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientists of all time, was to write, "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself and now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." And so the paths of science and theology both reflect the way of knowing as surrounded and held in perspective by the way of unknowing. God talk, focus on infinity. I want to explore here the theological conversation about God and the scientific conversation about the world to see how our recent advances in cosmology and mathematics bear on this conversation. The key concept here will be infinity, including traditional notions of God's infinity in space and God's infinity in time or eternity. Now, infinity is not a biblical term, nor does it carry a single meaning in the theological, philosophical, or scientific communities. Wow, how about that? Interesting. Since I am kind of surrounded by people who want to talk about infinity, it seems to me. That came from, as Owen Thomas points out, this is the reference. As Owen Thomas points out, although infinity is not a biblical concept, its various meanings are implied about God throughout the Bible. It includes God being present everywhere and at all time and being unlimited in power and knowledge. So there's scripture that he cites. The traditional difficulty has been to reconcile the concept that God is infinite with the concept that God is personal. Owen C. Thomas, Theological Questions, Analysis, and Argument is where that came from, page 38. Moreover, whenever we move from the language of one community to that of another and across periods of time in history, we must recognize the differences as well as the similarities of language. Still, for our purposes, I assume that sufficient communities exist between these communities and periods of time to allow us to compare the meaning of the term infinity in a reasonable way. I hope to show that this term has, in fact, played a key role in all three communities: scientific, philosophical, and theological. Because of this, recent discoveries in the scientific community about infinity can have a direct bearing on our understanding of the concept of God. Why choose infinity? As I have suggested, when we say that God is infinite and eternal, we normally do so by the via negativa, by the way of utter contrast with the finite and temporal world that God created. So we're comparing our finite world to an infinite world of God. This reflects a view of infinity that dates back to the ancient Greeks, where infinity is defined apophatically through its contrast with the finite. The infinite is called apeiron. A-P-E-I-R-O-N. I don't know why they're using so many of these words and not really explaining them. Meaning unbounded, unlimited, or formless. Okay, can we just say that the infinite is unbounded, unlimited, or formless? But the infinity utterly beyond our understanding, is infinity utterly beyond our understanding, or can we know something about the meaning of infinity without exhausting all that can be true of it, reflecting the cataphatic way of knowing? Recent developments in mathematics and scientific cosmology may shed provocative new light on this issue. First, mathematicians have now given us a new conception of infinity that is much more complex than previously thought, with layers of infinity leading out endlessly to an unreachable absolute. In effect, we now can say a lot more about infinity than merely that it contrasts with the finite. Indeed, an infinite amount more. How might these revolutionary discoveries in mathematics enhance our concept of God as infinite? Second, as we have moved from the ancient cosmologies of the Bible and the Greeks into the immensity of the Big Bang cosmology, in which the universe is billions of light years, or perhaps an infinite size and expanding in time. How can this revolutionary understanding of immensity of nature help us appreciate the immensity and ineffability of the God who is its creator? Some see these developments as leading into pantheism, the equating of God and the universe, or to atheism, the outright rejection of God. Clearly, these questions are extraordinarily complex, and the relevant literature is enormous. Still, I suggest that these fascinating developments in mathematics and cosmology actually clarify and increase our understanding of God the Creator as infinite and eternal, and of the universe as dependent on God for its existence and purpose. And that comes from Rudy Rucker, Infinity and the Mind, its recommendation, The Science and Philosophy of the Infinite. So it's recommending some other readings, not actually a site. The Brief History of Infinity in Mathematics and Cosmology. It is possible to regard the history of the foundations of mathematics as a progressive enlarging of the mathematical universe to include more and more infinities. The concept of infinity in Greek and medieval thought includes a discussion first of philosophy and mathematics and second of cosmology. The ancient Greek writers who first developed both philosophy and mathematics defined the concept of infinity as apeiron, that means literally unbounded. In doing so, they gave what they thought was an unequivocal method for distinguishing the infinite from the finite. Something is finite if it has no limit, infinite if it has no limit or end. It is boundless or unlimited or endless. It is chaotic and lacks any structure or order. In essence, they defined infinity by contrast to the finite. The infinite is totally different from, even opposed to, those things that make up or ordinary experience. We might balk at this definition since there are many things in the world and in mathematics that have no end or limit or boundary, but are still finite. Think of the surface of the earth or the circumference of a ring. Each has a definite size but no edges or intrinsic limits. Or think of the length of a line segment to see the irony here. The segment is defined by 0 is greater than or less than times 1 times greater than or less than 1 is finite since it is bounded by both ends, 0 and 1, whereas the smaller interval 0 is less than x, which is less than 1, is unbounded. But surely the infinite is not less than the finite, or is it? Actually, paradoxes related to infinity, such as these, date back as far as ancient Greece, traceable to Zeno of Elea. The classical example is the famous race between Achilles and the tortoise. Being slower, the tortoise is giving a head start over Achilles, but being faster, Achilles overtakes the tortoise and wins the race. But how is this possible? Since every time Achilles catches up to where the tortoise was moved ahead a small amount, and so on and so on. How is it possible for Achilles to pass the tortoise in a finite amount of time? Through arguments like these, classical Greek thought came to view the finite world of our experience in sharp contrast to the infinite. Thus, they believed that the formless and indeterminate infinity underlies the world of finite entities, and that finite entities are good precisely because they are formed, bounded, and determinate in contrast with the infinite. Speculation concerning infinity traces back even farther in time. Anaximander from 610 to 547 BC was probably the first Western philosopher to think in detail about infinity. The infinite was a spherical, limitless substance, eternal, inexhaustible, lacking boundaries or distinctions. The world of finite entities arises out of that which is infinite. Pythagoras, 570 to 500 BC, too, rejected the infinite as having anything to do with the real world. All actual things are finite and representable by the natural numbers 1, 2, 3, and so on. Pythagoras taught that the geometrical forms, point, line, plane, and solid, arise when a mathematical limit is imposed on the underlying infinite structure. Plato, 428 to 348 BC, believed that good must be definite rather than indefinite, and therefore it must be finite rather than infinite. According to Plato, God, as the demiurge, imposes limitations, intelligent form, on pre-existent matter, giving rise to the structured world around us as an ordered whole instead of a formless, unintelligible, infinite chaos. In all these cases, the infinite took on a negative quality compared with the finite. But it was the philosopher Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, who provided a vital part of the conception of infinity that continued to pervade Western thought until the 19th century. Aristotle altered the concept of infinity to mean an unending process, something unfinished or incomplete. The infinite has this mode of existence. One thing is always being after another, and each thing that is taken is always finite, but always different. For example, consider the unending succession of natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, the endless succession of the seasons, or the endless division of a line interval into smaller and smaller portions. Aristotle apparently thought of these as potentially infinite, since the series can be continued endlessly, but not as fully or actually infinite, since being endless, we never really transcend the finite steps into the series to reach the term or limit of the series, i.e. the actual infinite, and thus to view the finite infinite series as a given totality. It is plain from these arguments that there is no body which is actually infinite. This view in turn was altered further by the philosopher Plotinus. According to God, or the one is infinite, being free of both internal and external limits. Plotinus saw matter as evil because it is infinite, unbounded, and formless, following the early philosophical traditions of the Greeks. But he also thought of the divine mind as good because because of its inexhaustible power, overwhelming unity, and self-sufficiency. Still, the absolute could not be considered infinite given the pejorative connotations. Instead, the absolute is beyond conception or analogy with the finite world. Okay, that's enough of this. I thought this might be kind of informative or interesting, but it's really not. So you know what we're going to do? We're probably going to go to the other book, which is our humanities book. I think I've really given that a shot, and it's just way too much. I will stop for a minute, though, and just consider this, that the infinite is not good, and it creates chaos. Does an infinite God Yeah, it might, right? I mean, if we have infinity, are we bounded by rules? What would make us agree to these forms? Simply our hearts and not laws? I don't know, but what I might suggest is that's what the infinite power wants. And Isn't it really what you want? Isn't it really that you want to bring order to infinite life? And the only way really God is telling you that you can do that is by agreeing to these terms. I've said it before. You might say Democrats want laws. Well, maybe Democrats want laws because they don't believe in God. Isn't that what you put on them? Isn't that what you put on them? That Democrats aren't God-fearing? And therefore, they need laws. Now, on the flip side of that, what are you demanding right now to end your chaos? Laws. You are saying we cannot agree on this. We can't agree to be peaceful. We can't agree to improve ourselves. We can't agree to forgive everybody. We can't agree to be determined. We can't agree on these things to build our spirit. Really? You can't? You can't agree on what is righteous? Really? Because it sounds like everybody's talking about the same thing. We can't agree on what is peace? Because it sounds like everybody's talking about the same thing. We can't agree on love? Because it sounds like everybody's talking kind of about the same thing. Compassion? We can't agree on those things? And so what do you want? What do you want? Politicians? Politicking? What do you want? You want an infinite God? Without God? Without chaos? You want no laws from the Democrats? You want to make your own laws based on these things, but not if these things apply to what? Democrats, women, children? If I don't have a right over my kids, then you're going to tell me I have to teach them courage? Is that what you're going to tell me? Some serious thinking to be done when you come into contact with somebody who is very different than you. What do you do about it? Throw your hands up in the air, give up God? I mean, as I've said and as these readings have demonstrated, he's kind of impervious. What does that mean to you? You're going to stop being agreeable? If God's impervious, why wouldn't I be impervious? God's not impervious to all things. He expects that you have these laws on your heart as He wrote them. And now what are you going to do about that? I agree. Religion has brought nothing but strife and division. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what I'm talking about here. We are talking about the truth and then walking in that truth with the knowledge of what our human spirit is, what our human nature is. And if you don't know, again, what our human nature is, I try to present that to you in a lot of different ways. It's not our human nature to put other humans down. That is not human. That's not humanity. So what exactly is the bitterness? or the ignoring, the ignorance of God to you? And is it so bound in what you receive on a daily basis? Is it always bound in material goods? We have needs. Maslow pointed out those needs. What is so hard about believing that we need to supply those needs? Food, shelter, safety, love, feeling good about yourself, and then living for a purpose. What is so hard about a community coming together for those things? What's so hard about that? Jesus Christ, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that you can't work for this kind of human spirit knowing the needs of people? Food, water, clean water, love, sex, to feel safe. You don't know these things? And so you toss out God because you don't know those things? You're full of shit. You don't know those things. You know goddamn well that those are our needs. And you know that people are usurping needs from other human beings and throwing their hands up in the air and say, well, I don't believe in God. Or where is God in all of this? He's looking for you. Where are you in all of this? Where are you in your expectations? Where are you in improving this world? Where are you? Nobody gives a shit what you believe in. Where are you? Where are you in this? Blowing pot smoke in my house? Wasting our services? Calling in 911 calls? Is that where you are? Because I know some God might want to get rid of you. You don't have to believe. You don't have to pray. You have to be a human being. And if you're not, I don't know where the mercy of God shows up on you then. You allow the betrayal and abuse of women and children? I don't know where God shows up on you then. You want to railroad the economy of the United States? Of the world? You want to railroad the economy for production and material goods? I don't know where God's mercy is on you. I don't know. I don't know where your human spirit is. I don't know what your spirit agrees to. I don't know. And I don't know why anyone who calls themselves human wouldn't know how to agree to these kinds of rules. I don't know. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to probably get into the humanities book, which is what I said I was going to get into in May. Just because, this is complex stuff. Looking at God under a microscope in this way doesn't probably help a lot of people. It gives me some big questions, which I appreciate. And that's part of this program. It is part of the program. Right? So, Dr. Annette Feravich, it is May 6th. I will be here tomorrow on May 7th. It is day 344 in the classroom. Thanks so much for joining me here, where I am the teacher. This is healthy mind, body, spirit, and that is our goal. My goal. Thanks for joining me.